Okay, hi, I'm Kristen Howerton.
I'm Elizabeth Esther from elizabethesther.com.
And the two of us are going to be doing a hopefully regular web series called Right Mom, Left Mom. And this is our debut.
Yay!
So let me just explain a little bit why we wanted to do this. Elizabeth and I are good friends, and we have also appeared on Fox and Friends together, ironically, opposing sides.
That was fun.
That was really fun. So anyway, what Elizabeth and I have talked about is the fact that while both of us have come from slightly different political backgrounds, somehow we managed to talk about these things without calling each other names, degrading each other, ripping each other's hair out, right?
Yeah, it's shocking how that can actually happen.
So do you want to tell a little bit about why we decided to do this?
Yeah, I think one of sort of the conversation that we got into was that these are such great issues that all of us want to talk about, and they're important to us, but it's really frustrating because it seems like so much of the dialogue has descended into name calling and finger pointing, and that the issues get lost in a lot of the inflammatory rhetoric. And especially as moms, I know that I want to just have a conversation without being called, some crazy name. I want to be able to have the conversation. I do want to hear the other side. I do want to examine the issue, and I want to be able to do that with my friends and with other moms without feeling like I'm going to get attacked for maybe having a difference of opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. That you'll be called a name, that you'll be kind of generalized as, oh, if you think this is who you are as a nutshell.
Exactly.
And I know we've both observed, we're friends on Facebook and we follow each other on Twitter, and we've observed these kind of 140 character arguments people get into or posts that people put up that just seem to not actually move the conversation forward, but just further kind of alienate people.
Yeah, and entrench each other in like our positions, that are warring against each other, when really I'm convinced there is middle ground where we can meet and we can talk about it, and even if we do come to a different conclusion, we can still walk away from that conversation having respect for each other.
Absolutely. So why don't you, give a little bit about your political leanings and background, and then I'll share mine, and
okay,
people know where we're coming from.
Yeah. I do tend to consider myself a social conservative, mainly because I have a very personal sort of emotional connection to Ronald Reagan. I grew up, I think he was sort of the first president that I really remember hearing on the radio, and I was fascinated by him. I was fascinated just by his compassionate, genteel, gracious, the way he just comported himself. And I especially loved that he was this conversationalist. And there's this great story during the throes of the Cold War where I think he went up to Camp David and he was just going to meet with Gorbachev, and they were just going to sit down and have a conversation. And there's this story where they sit, I think it's outside, like by an outdoor campfire or some, I don't know, it was like an outdoor, and they're just sitting there talking. And they, these two people from completely different paradigms and completely different, opposing ways of viewing the world were able to sit down and have a conversation. And I really admired that about him, and especially if you go to the Reagan Presidential Library, there's this slab of the Berlin Wall that is just so symbolic of what he was able to achieve through diplomatic. Yeah, I know he didn't do it single-handedly, but that's something that really means a lot to me. He really cared about freedom of human beings, and for me that's always been sort of my core value.
Gotcha. So I tend to consider myself an independent, although I do typically vote Democratic. for the Democrat Party. I don't really love the idea of political parties, to be honest. I don't like the idea that how I vote should always kind of fall down the same line, because in my opinion, how I view issues of abortion shouldn't be tied to how I view issues of many taxes people pay, or gun control. I don't really like the fact that all of these issues are kind of bundled, and people are getting into this groupthink of, if I am this, then I think this. So I try to keep a really independent mind and look at each issue independently, as opposed to looking to a political party to tell me where I stand. That having been said, I usually vote pretty Democrat, and I would even say that I have some socialist leanings. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. So we've talked about this a little bit before, but where are you coming from in terms of like maybe frustrations either with the current political climate or even with your own political affiliation?
I think what's really frustrating me right now, especially, and I totally agree with you on that part, where I get frustrated because I do feel like I do end up voting down party lines, even though, a lot of I'm like, no, I don't want to go that way, but I feel like I'm being pulled because there's a limited choice, and this is like, it's this or nothing.
Yeah.
And, and that is actually very similar to where I feel right now, with the Republican Party especially, is I feel that it's, when Obama was elected, all of a sudden there was this huge freak out, and, like all of a sudden the Tea Party just exploded out of nowhere, and all of a sudden I don't recognize what's going on in my party anymore. We are being pulled to this uber traditionalist, uber conservative, hyper literalistic view of conservatism, which I think doesn't truly serve the party. And so that would be one of my frustrations. I feel like it's being taken over.
Absolutely. And, to your point, I think some of my frustrations are just, it seems to me like, especially in election years, but I think this is true all the time, I think people really base their opinion on what the party is telling them. And then you've got all these politicians who pretty much refuse to budge on things. So really nothing happens. And I feel like, whether a bill is passed or not really doesn't have as much to do as the merit of the bill as it does who penned it.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And how that's going to improve their political career or look for their party record or, that kind of thing. So I feel very frustrated. I feel frustrated that, right now it kind of seems like if anybody has a gaffe, the other party is immediately jumping on it. But then if this person has a gaffe, it's like, oh, it's no big deal.
Right. We're not, number one, we're not allowed to be human. Yeah. We're not allowed to make mistakes. And if something good is happening, well, we can't support it because so-and-so pinned the bill.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating to me because really what government is, it's about compromise and being able to work together and reaching across the aisle and saying, okay, maybe we don't agree on this particular thing, but we can see the greater good, so we're going to come together for that.
Absolutely.
And that is what is so frustrating me right now about the political atmosphere in the United States of America, is we have become increasingly polarized and just like refuse to work with people because they're on the wrong side of the aisle. It's just ridiculous to me.
I completely agree. And I think, as a society, we have to have a little bit more faith that even if someone believes differently from us politically, that they are still, especially if they have, spent their life involving themselves in government, that they are still patriotic, that they still want the best for our country. They just might have a different idea of how to get there.
Exactly.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of an idea about what Left Mom, Right Mom is going to be about. So stay tuned. I think that we're going to be doing more of these, hopefully once a week, especially as the election progresses, and we'll be getting into more issues to talk about. So thanks for joining us, and stay tuned.